Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Chat with Chaps. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're listening from. This is the Midweek Deep Dive, where we pick a topic each week and, well, surprise, surprise, we deep dive into that topic. And this week, we are going to be deep diving into the eye test. It does appear on the eye that Millwall this season, A, should have more points than we currently do with 4 points. B, that we're actually playing some good football. And C, that we're playing a slightly evolved footballing style. Now, today, we're going to dig into that and we're going to use data points to basically back up what conclusions we're going to draw. And in order to do that, first of all, I'm going to introduce a new person to the show who, can I just say right off the bat before we get into it, has been an absolute legend in providing tons of data for us. Therefore, we will let him off the fact that he's a Bristol City fan, but he comes with a really analytical data set, tons and tons of fantastic points on Millwall, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming him on the show. Dave, welcome, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. Nice to talk about another club as well. Probably get a slightly less biased view as a result, not always focusing on Bristol City. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, and can't wait to get into some of the data you're going to share with us, Dave. And my right arm, Mr. Ben Green. Welcome back, mate. How you doing?
All good, mate. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think we've said before we're data geeks, aren't we, Chris? So yeah, having Dave on, having the vast amount of data that he's amazingly provided for us. So another thanks to Dave for that. But yeah, can't wait to go through this. Really looking forward to it.
Yes, mate. We are, and I think we all. That data geekness probably all stems from the jobs that we all do, right? So it's like you're combining your job and your passion for your football club, which is just absolutely fantastic. So I think to start off with, I'm just going to share the amount of data that we have looked at, because I think, and I'm not going to go through all of this line by line, but I just wanted to sort of set the scene of the types of data we've looked at, and then we'll dig into some key pieces. So just sharing now. So we have all sorts here. So we have some specific Opta stats that we're going to go through. So that's one source. And then we have another source, which Dave can give us a little bit more about in a moment, which is Y-Scout, which is a professional data system for all things football around the globe. So we can look at XG, we can look at possession, passes, passing network, shots against, key passes, penalty area, aerial duels, long passes, you name it. So the point of me showing you this Excel is to not go into detail on everything, but just to showcase the amount of data that we're going to be looking at throughout the course of this show. All comparisons, by the way, in any data that we mention are essentially comparing the start of this season versus the whole of last season. Now, I know obviously we went through, well, technically 4 different managers last season. So yes, there'll be a little bit of that. But I do think it will give us a real flavour of how potentially our playing style has progressed this season. Dave, do you just want to give us a little bit more on some of the data providers?
Yeah, I think there's probably kind of 3 main providers out there that are used in the kind of 2 of them certainly in the professional world, and that's StatsBomb, which unfortunately is far too expensive for a man of my means, and as you know, pro clubs only, and not even all pro clubs will use StatsBomb, and that's the kind of golden source of data, and it's got some fantastic. It's got the most advanced XG model in it, and that's probably worth saying that some of the other XG models that you'll see in Y-Scout, which is what I typically use, which is a much cheaper data service, and something like FBref that takes its data from Opta, are probably less sophisticated, but if you take them over a bigger sample of games, and as Chris has just said, 4 games isn't a great sample, but we're looking just to highlight things at this point. We'll draw maybe at the next international window, when you've played 9 games, there'll probably be some better conclusions to be drawn, but they're kind of things to look out for at this point. But those things do tend to, over a longer period of time, highlight how your club's performing, even if you're not necessarily getting the results. And sometimes that might be overperformance, and you've got a dip coming up, or underperformance, and actually things might look rosier in the future. So yeah, different sources. And I've used a couple of different ones in here in terms of preparing the data. But what we're trying to conclude today is what are you guys seeing with your eyes? Does the data back them up? And actually, are there some things that you're not necessarily seeing that are actually positive from the data as well? So we'll cover some of those things too.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Absolutely. Let's do that. So let's go quite high level, and then we can go deeper into certain topics. So I'm just going to share a graphic on screen that we've prepared. And what this one does is this compares where we are ranked in the league for this particular area this season versus last season. So for those of you listening on podcast, I am going to read this out. So the first one is XG. Now, again, this is from Wyscout. It can differ. So I think OptaStats has us at second, whereas Wyscout has us as first. But directionally, I think that's the key here. So XG, last season, we were 19th in the league. So far this season, we are top, which actually blows my mind just saying it out loud, considering that, we've had years of a very defensive Gary Rowett and the stigma that goes with a Neil Harris side to actually have that as first after 4 games is fascinating to me, and we're certainly going to dig into that. XG against, last season 17th, this season 6th. So, of course, that basically means the amount of quality chances that we're conceding to the opposition. Interestingly, possession and total passes, not much change at all. So last season, 22nd for both of them. This season, a slight drop-off, actually. 23rd for possession and bottom of the league for total passes. But, again, interestingly, long passes, last season we were 6th, this season 12th. So a drop-off in the amount of long passes. Then as we look more forward and up the pitch, 4th in terms of shots so far this season versus 22nd last season. So we're having a lot more shots, which obviously is leading to that increased XG. And then finally, touches in the penalty area last season, 21st, this season, 9th. So my overall summary here is a significant improvement in the attacking areas, which is lending itself to more chances, more goals. Not quite yet the points, which we talked about. But based on this data, directionally, we're trending upwards. Ben, I'll come to you first. What do you take? What are your key takeouts from that data set?
Well, exactly what you said there, mate. In terms of, we mentioned at the top of the show, we're kind of going on eye test versus data, right? And I think we've all said that the football's improved. We seem to be, in terms of an attacking sense, a lot more dangerous. And we seem to be creating a lot more. You look at that data in a very simplistic way, but if our XG is higher than the opponents and our XG against is lower than the opponents, more often than not, you're going to win more games. And as we said, we're going to have more points on the board. So very simplistic. That is the way I would interpret that. In terms of the other areas, the one that I found the most interesting was the fact that the long passes, and that's again we've highlighted that as a real evolution of Neil Harris, or could he evolve in terms of the long passes that we played? Again, I know we're looking at a whole season versus only 4 games, but yeah, it's all in a direction that we probably expected, having seen the first 4 games of the season. And just another one that I wanted to highlight there, the XG per shot as well. We've actually got the highest in the league for the XG per shot. So again, not only the XG amount that we're creating over the course of a game, but the individual chances are higher than anyone else in the league at the minute. So we talk about creativity as Millwall fans. We've lacked it at certain times, certainly with a pragmatic Gary Rowett in charge. But yeah, look, I think in summary, we're trending in the right direction. We haven't got the points on the board that we would hope for, but all the data points are pointing in the right direction, that we are going to do better than we have been in recent seasons. So yeah, all very positive, mate. All
very positive. And that one you just touched on there in terms of XG per shot, that's, to me, that's a indicator of the quality of chances that we're creating. It's not just we're creating bundles of chances, actually good quality ones too. Dave, what's your overall take on those sort of key stats?
Well, I think there's two bits for me. There's the numbers, and I think I probably just echo everything that you guys have just said there, that they're trending in the right direction. The attacking stats are going up and the defensive ones are looking better, which is a pretty combination to have. I think the other observation comes from having watched you in the Midleague. Now, I was there at Ashton Gate when we beat you 4-3. Yeah, gloss over the result, but I didn't think you felt like a old style Millwall team of old, and I've watched some of the highlights of other games as well, and you don't seem, to be a typically long ball nasty Millwall side. You seem to be wanting to play a bit more. Wouldn't say you're not building up from the back and trying to play like Swansea, but you're playing I guess perhaps a Neil Harris version 2, or how many times has he been your manager? Maybe it's 3 or 4, I don't know, but it's an evolution of Neil Harris's football, I think, under you, and it looked pretty good. It was a really good game, Ashton Gate, for those that watched or went, and I think there's definitely a different style coming out this season.
And hold the fort there on the Ashton Gate game, because I know you want to dig into that a little bit more, and I also do want to talk about Neil Harris version 2. But before we do, Ben, in terms of conceding chances, that XG against, we didn't really discuss that. Is there anything you want to just sort of pull out there, mate?
Yeah, well, so look, obviously you've got XG4, right, which is as it sounds, which is our chances that we're expected to score, but the XG against, and we've seen a huge differentiator there as we showed in the table, right? So we had 7th worst in the league last year to the 6th best in the league this year. But more importantly, if we actually look at the stats on that from the data that Dave provided, we're actually conceding 0.5 XG, or 0.51 to be precise, XG less a game. So I know it's ultimately half a goal, right? Which is, if you look at it statistically, but that is a huge amount. So not only have we improved in terms of our chances conceded per game, the quality of those chances, I know it can be accumulative over a couple, or say 5, 0.1 or whatever it might be, but yeah, ultimately the level of XG against is dropping hugely. So not only are we seeing improvement at the top end of the pitch, we've already touched upon, but defensively as well, despite conceding 4 and 3 in 2 games, it's improving. So the chances that we are conceding against us are relatively low XG.
Yeah, which again is that quality element, right? That's a super point there. And I think that what I want to do is I want to dig into 3 core areas, right? The first area I want to dig into is that Neil Harris version 2 that Dave alluded to. And I personally don't think he's been given enough credit for that so far this season. And yes, it's a sample size of 4 games. I understand that, but we can only talk about what we have. And I'm sure near the end of the season, we'll come back on and see where we're at, right? But I want to talk about that. That's one area I want to dive into. The second area I want to dive into is the pressing. And the reason I want to dig into this a little bit more is because a lot has been made around the fact that we've basically replaced number 10 with Zian Fleming going out the door and George Honeyman coming in. And most people are like, God, what is that? That's not a like-for-like replacement. But actually, there might be a lot of value in what he's bringing in a pressing sense. So I want to touch on that as a second point. And then the third point I want to dig into a little bit is the overall playing style in sense of position on the pitch, who's passing to who, that kind of matrix of passing. So they're the kind of 3 sort of deep dives I want to dig into. But let's start with Neil Harris version 2. And I'm just going to flick something up on screen, which I find fascinating. So thank you, Dave, for sharing this. And this is, do you know what, Dave? I'll hand it to you. Tell us what this is.
It's the really, really basic view of how teams play. And you top left are your fast and direct teams, as it say, and bottom right are your slow and intricate. And it's saying there that Millwall are fast and direct, but that doesn't necessarily mean your long ball. And I think that's probably the bit that this picture doesn't say. It says actually you're moving the ball up the pitch quickly. And I think what we'll see in the Championship is that a lot of teams are really good at getting men behind the ball, structured defences, and difficult to break down. And I think Millwall's pace of attack is what's leading to that improvement in the attacking third. They're not allowing teams to get set defensively. So you can read this as, they must be the most direct team. And you probably are the most direct team, but you're not direct as in perhaps what a lot of people might think. And then you can see in the bottom right, you've got your kind of Swanseas and your West Broms and things like that. So, which are teams that typically, pass the ball a lot. There are some outliers in our early games, like Cardiff are in that particular area. Last season, the likes of Ipswich were kind of in that top right, they pass the ball well and they also pass it quickly. And that's probably why they were a difference to the likes of Southampton and Leicester, who were definitely in that bottom right, slow and intricate. And that's probably what gave them the edge last season. I don't know if you've got the comparison of last season there, Chris, but it's probably worth just flashing that up if you can. On the spot.
I don't think I do, mate.
Don't worry if you haven't. I've probably described it, but I think you've moved from being a fast and direct team playing long ball to a fast and direct team playing more passing, but playing forward and making those progressive passes. I think, Ben, you've probably looked at some of those things, haven't you, in terms of your passing forward, and it's not just route one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go into that in a second in terms of the combinations, but just flick that back up, Chris, if you can, just in terms of that chart there. But we talk about, again, a Neil Harris Millwall team, and we think fast and direct, and we're not just in that top left-hand corner sort of with 4 or 5 other teams. We are well ahead of the other teams. And again, I just want to point out that we want to sort of couple this stat with exactly what Dave said there. It's not just long ball. We're not playing long, aimless balls here, and that's what's equating to fast and direct. It's fast and direct, but as Dave said, it's shorter passing, which has been backed up by the evidence of the data we've shown so far. We're making more passes, we're playing less long balls, etc. So if you think of what we want to see as fans, certainly Millwall fans, and what we'd expect from a Neil Harris team, it's exactly that. And I think it's just going to go to show, again, when we talk through the passing sort of network and then the players that we're passing to, how that actually works. But for me, that's exactly where I want to see us as a Millwall fan. As long as the data points, again, that we've already touched upon about us, the long balls are coming down and the passes are increasing, that's exactly where I want us to be.
Absolutely, and this is why it is an evolved Neil Harris style, because Neil Harris is always fast and direct. You go back 5-6 years ago, it was 2 wingers, big centre forward, balls into the box, and it's just we are doing that, but just in a slightly different way. So we've actually made 11% more passes this season than last season, and bear in mind that also averages out Joe Edwards' era where it was all about passes, right? So that's another stat that I think sort of backs some of that up. So I think to draw conclusions from this, we are fast and direct. We do have a unique style, as we were far and away in the top left-hand corner. It is working for us, and it is a slightly evolved style from last season. Anything else that we would want to bring out there on that specific topic before we move into some of those passing dynamics?
Just a couple of points to actually call out that we didn't have on the infographic, Chris, but just 2 interesting ones for me. So our key passes have actually dropped in the first 4 games compared to last year, which I thought was quite interesting considering our XG's increased. And this was a very, very tight one, but our shots per 90 on target have dropped by nearly 5% as well. So again, look, just very small sample size, but in terms of all the positive indicators, you'd expect those to probably be higher. But yeah, the key passes one was an interesting one for me. And again, I'm not entirely sure what a key pass would look like or what the parameters are, what they class a key pass as, right? But yeah, it was an interesting one for me. It's only a very, very slight drop off. It's 1.89 to 1.85 this season. So it's very, very, very slight. But again, in terms of XG going up, you'd expect that to, well, I would just naturally expect that to have increased, and the shots on target, obviously. But maybe that's why we drew 0-0 at Hull.
I think just to add on to that as well, if once again, kind of using the Bristol City match, if you look at the goals you scored that day, obviously you've got a penalty included in there, which, for the geeks out there, that's got an XG of 0.76. Most of the data I've got will be kind of like non-penalty XG, although some of the ones will include it in. I think if you look at Watmore's goal that day, I sat there.
Yeah,
in a position,
very low on
the
the
ground. I was right behind it, and it was like such a good volley. And even SA's goal that day, I know he got kind of broke through a tackle, probably a bit of a weak tackle, but that's still a goal, an opportunity that doesn't end up in a goal 8 or 9 times out of 10. So you're kind of taking good chances. Well, I think, watching the highlights of the other games, I think, Watmore got in at the back post against Watford against on a bit of a counter attack and slam one in. And I think he did the same later in the game as well. So I think you're creating those chances. They're probably not, once again, statistically great chances. But I think if you factor in the fact that they're against defences on the retreat and not structured, they've got a better chance of scoring as well. And that's probably one of the kind of flaws in the XG model, unless you're paying for like stats bomb data, is that they don't always take all of these factors into account. So there's something else called post-shot XG that's kind of starting to come out there. It's not in my data set, or not in the data set that I can kind of extract at the moment, where it actually looks at the kind of placement of the shot as well, and says if it's in the corner, it'll have a better post-shot XG than a shot that goes straight at the keeper. So those typically, 10-yard chances that dribble into the keeper's arms that would have had a good high XG score because of the position they were taken at, they actually get devalued going forward because actually they weren't a very good strike. And at the kind of top level of Premier League, people like, Harry Kane statistically has had one of the best post-shot XGs out there because he finds the corners, and that's why he scores. So just a bit of added info in there. But I think the goals you've scored so far this season have been good goals. And I think, you hope that actually you'll get some easier chances than that and take those as well. Perhaps you've missed some easy chances as well. So that's averages itself out. And
that was kind of my point there, Dave. Is actually that points to us missing easier chances, and we've scored the lower XG, more difficult chances again, which is only a positive thing, right? Because over a course of a season, you're going to expect the higher XG chances that we're going to score more of those, but then there might be the drop off in the harder ones. But yeah, I think that's really worth pointing out.
And I think Dave, you touched on a few individuals there, like the likes of Romain Esse, Duncan Watmore. And we're not going to go deep into individuals today. This is more around the sort of structure of the team and things like that. But in a future show, we definitely are, because I think there's certainly a few players that are performing at the top end of their abilities. Duncan Watmore being one of them. I think it's been well documented that Casper De Norre has had an excellent start to the season as well. So there's a few that we will definitely in a future show pick up. I just wanted to address that. Right. So evolved playing style, but still forming the kind of Millwall'S that you would expect, which is fast, direct, Neil Harris, but just a slightly evolved playing style. Now let's talk a bit about how the passing element comes into this. So we're going to flick something up on screen, Ben, and would love just for you to sort of give us your thoughts on this one, mate. So lots of charts. So maybe just first of all, do you just want to explain what this is, and then what some of your key takeouts are from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave very kindly has shared this data for us. So we're seeing here the passing network. So ultimately what it is, it's the top links between players in our passing progression throughout the team. So we've got two values for each. I'll just pick out the last game. So against Sheffield Wednesday, our top passing link was between SA and Casper De Norre. And there was 14 times they passed between each other. We've also got that broken down in terms of which order that goes in. So ultimately what that means is, and what we're probably going to talk through is, so are we playing forward more, or are we ultimately playing backwards and sideways? And again, for me, I was looking at where are our combinations coming from? Are they going forward, or again, are we a bit more side to side? What this won't take into consideration, I think that's right, Dave, is saying uncompleted pass. So if we have, say, it's gone from right back to centre half, and then that's gone long, and that hasn't hit any Millwall player, that would count as an uncompleted pass. So that link won't be shown. But ultimately, yeah, what I wanted to talk through here is just to chat through the progression and the passing links that we tend to have based on the last 2 games of last season and the first 4 of this season.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you see those kind of shapes are fairly similar in 3 of those 4 games. I think you'll talk a little bit about Hull in a minute, and I'll probably interject with some more stuff. And then you look at the last 2 games of last season, which are the Swansea and Plymouth games, and they're a bit of a different shape. And so, yeah, there's some things just to see purely from a shape without even looking at the kind of numbers underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if let's start with Hull then, Dave. Just because you highlighted this when we were kind of chatting pre-recording. So, do you want to call out what you saw there compared to, say, the other 3 games of this season?
Hull, as I say, is the one that's got the slightly different shape in it, and you can see there that you kind of right back and right centre back positions are a lot deeper than everyone else, and you've not got that kind of nice, what looks a bit like a 4-4-2, 4-3-3 shape. It's it's pretty all over the place, and the reason I included the picture on the right was to show Hull shape in comparison, and you can see Hull shape there is very much the left winger and the left back are massively advanced. So it looks like, and I haven't seen, again, I've only seen highlights and there weren't many because it was a 0-0. But it looks like they pushed you back in that full-back area, and therefore, Leonard probably forced to play a lot of balls from deep in his own half, rather than perhaps in the other pictures where he's playing them from just inside your halfway line or on the halfway line. And Hull are probably one of those teams that are probably guilty of passing. They'll go out down one side and then they'll come back all the other way, and you can see that kind of big U shape in their picture, and you can see actually their wide players get the ball and make passes higher up the pitch than what their centre forwards and centre midfielders do. So they've got what I'll call it like Russell Martin ball, where you pass for the hell of it, and you haven't got that shape at all in any of your games, which kind of goes back to the previous subject matter where we're saying I think you're playing forward and you're playing forward well. So it's just a little bit of commentary on the Hull game as being a bit of an outlier, but possibly down to the way that Hull play.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you highlighting that there, something I hadn't actually noticed there, Dave. But yeah, the whole C, if we call it that, just in terms of that they're playing combinations, passing combinations. That would just looking at that screams to me passing for passing's sake. Yeah. Chris, Dave, I don't know what your thoughts would be on that, but there's a lot of backwards, side to side, which again, we go on the eye test versus the data, we can see it there.
I think there is this kind of, we touched on this off air, didn't we, gents? There is this kind of desire in modern football that keeps getting further and further and further down the pyramid to, you coined it perfectly, as Russell Martin ball, right? And this is why when they go into the Premier League, teams like Southampton, if they continue to play that style, they'll struggle because they are not, they're not the best at it. But just looking at this whole shape here, one of the things I noticed, if you look at the top 10 links, if you like, it's pretty much all their defenders.
Yeah.
So all their defenders, they have the ball. I mean, even the bottom one is actually their keeper. And again, if you just look at the amount of lines going from their keeper versus ours, you can see the amount of times that the keeper's got the ball. It really is bemusing why teams continue to use this style, Dave.
Yeah, I'm being really sad. And then once again, one of the tools of Y Scout is you can click on a player and you can pick out certain things that the players do. So for an attacker, you might want to pull out all their assists. You can watch video of every single assist. You can watch every striker's dialogue with the midfield. You can do that. And I actually sat there over the weekend and watched all of Lucas Jensen's passes received and what he did with them, and most of them end up going.
I'll tell you what he done there, Dave. Kicked him straight out.
No, he's not Max O'Leary, but he tends, unless there's no one's pressing your defenders, he tends to probably invite the opposition onto him a little bit and then kicks long. So he's whereas Panda for Hull, he was an absolute bomb scare when we played them first game of the season. We recovered the ball, I think it was 9 times in the opposition third, and they gifted us so many chances. And he was playing like a centre back, coming out and playing between them. I'm really surprised in that game that his position so deep. But yeah, he plays like a centre back, and I think you picked it out, Ben, that he's involved in a lot of passes. He's that modern way of playing the sweeper keeper.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to just point out into the 4 games as a total. If you look at the Watford game, it's the only game this season where we've had more possession than the opponents. And our top 2 links for those that are listening on the podcast in the Watford game were between Hutch and Coops and Joe Bryan. for context, in the other 3 games, so Bristol City, we had Joe Bryan and Saville. The whole game was Honeyman and Esse, and then against Sheffield Wednesday, we had Esse and Casper De Norre. But again, what I want that to kind of highlight is, whilst they're not huge amounts between the two, if you compare it to Hull, for example, as in Hull against us, they're sort of in the 40s for passing it around. But if you see our numbers in those games, they're in the mid to high teens. So they're quite progressive passes, and they're between a defender and a midfielder, or a midfielder and attacker. So again, what I'm just trying to say to this is, against Watford, we obviously had the ball more than them. Did we use it in the best possible way? It seems like there was a lot of combinations between Hutch and Coops, or Coops and Joe Bryan. So, yeah, the other links, I think, again, just to back up with the stats, what we spoke about earlier, we're seeing a progressive style of football in terms of we're getting it forward quickly into midfield, or from midfield to up front, but in a shorter passing style, because they're going through those players. So, yeah, just wanted to call that out from that data as well.
I think that's a great point, Ben, because the other thing that struck me from that as well is the Watford game, obviously more passes and a higher pass completion rate, which to me articulates that we're being safe, really.
And if you look at that network, mate, between Coops and Hutch, and then I think it was Coops and Joe Bryan, to me that's so centre half to centre half and centre half to left back. So that would exactly back it up from what we've shown in that image, and the fact that we had 51% possession. I think it was 51 or 52% when I looked. So yeah, are we being effective with it when we have it more often? And from the 4 games that we've played, it would seem not. So yeah.
No, really, really interesting. I think we've kind of talked about 2 topics now, and what we've concluded is that we have an evolved playing style under Neil Harris, but it's still fast and direct. And the second conclusion is our passing is, well, there's certainly more of it. It's not long ball, and we're creating some interesting passing networks between players that can actually impact us in the final third. And again, that is a different nuance to what we've seen before. So, and that lends itself to Neil Harris version 2.0. So we've covered 2 points. The third point that we want to now cover is around pressing. And the reason that's important is because on the eye test, I have felt that we have been very aggressive with our pressing this season, and that we've been able to win the ball, a lot of high turnovers in our favour, with not many going the other way. And also, I believe we look fitter than ever. That's another thing that I think I've just notoriously, I remember last season, the players just didn't look that fit, whereas this season I feel that they do. So I want to talk a bit about pressing. I'm going to flick something up first before, Dave, we let you go deep into some of the bits and pieces that you talked about in terms of the Bristol City game. But I'm just going to flick this up on screen. And Dave, you're probably best to talk to this, but essentially this is where we rank in terms of pressing data, which is a combination of high turnovers and PPDA. But that's probably all jargon to most people. So do you just want to explain what that means and what the takeouts from this are?
Yeah, so PPDA is passes per defensive action. So this is how many passes you let your opposition have. Higher number shows you sit back. Lower number is you press high, or you press harder. I think there's also a bit of a common kind of parlance out there around high pressing versus hard pressing, and I think that comes maybe a bit from Jurgen Klopp's Gegenpress, which was both high and hard. They basically go after this. Every time they lose the ball, they want to get it back within 5 seconds type thing. And I think lots of people talk about, oh yeah, we want us to play high press, and what they don't necessarily qualify is that high press, as in you're going to go and squeeze the keeper, or whether you're going to go and hard press, that's in as soon as someone takes a touch, you're going to be swarming all over them. And I think Millwall are an interesting case on that. Their PPDA is fairly average in the league, at 12.9. But the key to this is, you can press as hard as you like, but if you don't win the ball back in the right areas, you're kind of wasting a lot of effort. And this is probably an area where Millwall, have improved this season. That they've got, 32 times they've turned the ball over this season in the opposition final third of the pitch. That's led to 7 shots, and they've scored 1 goal. And as you can see, it's kind of diminishing returns there. But 1 goal is joint level with the best. Oh no, sorry, there's a 2 out there in Sheffield United. But shot ending 7, you start to get some decent metrics in there. And, there's very few teams that have managed to pick up shots. And I think, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, taking shots against unstructured defences, for me, is a kind of fundamental of scoring more goals. It's hard to score against, that typical two banks of four and a deep defence. You want to catch them when they're not set. And that's what Millwall are doing. Without kind of going too much into the bad side of the Bristol City game, you caught us in that second half several times in behind our advanced left back, which exposed a player like Rob Dickey, who's not blessed with the greatest pace, and you created chances off the back of that. And if you won the ball somewhere around our halfway line, then that was the kind of key to then launching attacks into our box.
And again, just to jump in there, Chris, before you do, but again, that points to the fast, direct style, right? And that's, we're trying to link all this data together to see and talk through that progressive way of playing. And it's all pointing in the direction that we are. So we've already shown that we're fast and direct. Dave's just gone through the pressing data there. We're winning it higher up the pitch. Therefore, we're probably having higher XG chances because we're having better opportunities against, as Dave put it, unstructured defences. So, yeah, that's what you kind of, we're not analysts, right? We're only talking through it now as analysts, but if we're probably looking at it from a club's point of view, that's exactly what you'd want to see.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that you concluded it perfectly there, which is stitching all this stuff together. What does it mean? And we want our Millwall teams to be aggressive and to be front foot and to press high, but to not press for the sake of pressing. And I think one of the things that we also have is the fact that we've won it 32 times, but we're probably playing against teams like Hull that love to just have the ball at the back, right? So therefore, in those games, we'll be like, right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to press the hell out of the two centre-backs because they're going to have the ball for 50% of the possession, right? Which I think is super interesting. But before we go on to analysing, because Dave, I know you wanted to sort of touch on some of the particulars within the Bristol City Millwall game, but before we do that, was there anything else you wanted to add, Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to say that kind of pressing, and I've kind of alluded to it as well, that, you have to do it in a structured way as well. You have to trigger your pressing well, and without kind of going too much into the individuals. And I don't remember enough about Zian Fleming playing as the number 10 last year, but I think Ben or yourself touched on it earlier, that kind of change in number 10, although Honeyman's probably nowhere near as sexy as a footballer as Fleming, he's probably doing a lot for the team that probably gets unseen in terms of the way he links with Bradshaw or whoever's going to play up front, and the way that they then bring Essay and Watmore into that press as well. So they might not necessarily pinch the ball, on the edge of the box, but they're probably, or he's probably a massive help in winning the ball a little bit later in the opposition's build-up phase.
I'm beaming because we did a show recently where I was full of praise for George Honeyman, and naming no names, Joe, someone else in our team, in a chat with, I'm only joking, wasn't. And I'm just going to quickly flick up 2 data points that also show you where Mr. Honeyman has been effective going the other way as well. So we have here game week 4. After game week 4, key passes, George Honeyman joint 4th with 10. So he's up there with Finn Azaz, Chat Vatadze, who we've said on this show is the best player we've seen so far this season. Dembele, Doughty, a former, Premier League player that should probably still be there. So that's the first stat. And then the second one is expected assists. And again, after game week 4, joint second, none other than George Honeyman. So 2 data signals there that also lend itself to not only is George Honeyman playing an effective role in that pressing, but also going the other way. And he should have more goals and assists. I think back to the Watford double chance, Ben, where he should have scored, let's be honest. And he should have more goals and assists, the Pompey game as well. Just before we come to the Bristol City game, one thing I do want to mention here is you touched on something there, Dave, which triggered me, which was structure. You have to create a structure of when to press, how to press, when to press, who presses at what time, which player do you press. That structure isn't something that can be created by, in my opinion, other than the manager or the coaching staff, because he has to go out there and say, right, when this person has the ball, you press. When this person, whatever it may be. So again, I believe Neil Harris needs some credit here. I think he needs to take some credit for some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think, you'll probably pull up some pictures in a minute, and I can probably describe that structure.
Yeah, let's do that, mate.
But I think, I look back to, Gary Rowett days where you did press the ass off us and made it very difficult to get out. And it was probably more, gegenpress than anything else. But I think you played us at our weakness, which is, we weren't a particularly strong side, physically at that time. So you got in amongst us and made it really difficult to pass the ball into midfield. And we only wanted to pass into midfield under Lee Johnson. We didn't want to, go long. So I think you took advantage of that. Whereas I think what we're seeing, certainly in the game against us and the little bits of highlights I've watched of your other games, is you seem to have a much, better structure. And I think that's probably why your PPDA is not massively low in a good way, but actually your high turnovers are, because you're well set up, ready to press.
Yeah, love that. Well, let's look at some examples, Dave. So I'm going to pick up a couple of screenshots that you shared, starting with this one.
Yeah, so believe it or not, that's actually my view at Ashton Gate. And when I'm watching a home game, I take photos of shape. I'm particularly interested in City's shape and what we're trying to do at different phases. But I'm also interested in how the opposition counter it. And I've kind of called this your bog standard 4-4-2 structure. So you've got Honeyman and Bradshaw as your front two. And I think one of the key things I saw in that game, which I felt was a little bit less Millwall-y than previous Millwall, was that you did actually play Honeyman really high up the pitch. He didn't kind of retreat back into midfield. He didn't play as a typical number 10. He almost played alongside Bradshaw. So you've got that. And then you've got Essay on your outside and Watmore on the other side, who can work as a pair. And that's what the yellow lines are showing. They can work with a pair with Bradshaw on the left-hand side, and Essay can work with Honeyman on the right-hand side. So that whenever we go wide, and talking about those kind of trigger pressing, a lot of teams will press as soon as the ball goes to the fullback, because you're kind of almost narrowing the pitch in half, and that's a trigger to go and do that. Or the other kind of common trigger is off a bad touch by a centre back. So as soon as you see a heavy touch, it's right, everyone triggers. So I think you can see the ball's actually with I think it's with Rob Dickey at that point. I can't remember where it is, but or it's just going out, I think, to Zach Viner. But you can see you're there, position ready to squeeze that half of the pitch, and Tanner, our right back's probably not the most expansive footballer in the world. So you probably think you can go pretty hard on the press with him as well when he gets it. And certainly opposition teams target him. Certainly if it's a slightly worse than perfect ball out to him, they'll be right on him and trying to win the ball back off of him. And so you've got a good structure to go and do that from that position. And then this is a slightly different phase. So this is a kind of phase from the build-up, and you'll see, you're watching football over the last couple of years since they changed the back pass or the goal kick rule, that you can now kind of pass it to your keeper, and it's not until you've passed the ball that the opposition can enter the box. So you've got a slightly different phase there where you've got Honeyman and Bradshaw really trying to split the two centre-backs, and kind of one of them will decide on which way the ball goes, whether they press O'Leary and cover, try and cover two with one. But what you've also done is you've got Watmore, yellow arrow out towards Tanner, if you can just make him out underneath the VBet sign. And you've got Essay half covering Cam Pring, our left back, but also half covering Jason Knight inside. But the real key part of this is that I can't work out if the tip of that one is Denori or Saville. From the
Denor, yep.
Denor is trying to half gamble that we don't play into Joe Williams in that. So if, for example, Bradshaw splits left onto Viner, there's a nice easy pass into Joe Williams. But Denor has taken up a really kind of high risk position there in terms of making sure he's almost kind of half goal side of Joe Williams. So we can't pass there. So you'll make us go long there, or we've got to risk a pass. And typically O'Leary will go long. You'll probably win the header, and then it's about who picks up the bits and pieces. So it's kind of two different structures in that, which Harris has implemented. I think you've got the bog standard 4-4-2, which we saw in the previous one. And then you've got almost kind of, although I've not drawn it as a diamond, I think you've got a bit more of a diamond in there where Denori is happy to be the one that pushes on. That makes it very difficult to play out.
And Denor has also... I know it's difficult to get running stats, but I believe he is right near the top of our running stats this season. So that would show. Moving on to the next one, mate.
Yeah, this was just an example where we actually worked through your kind of press and your structure, and this is done very much from a kind of city side of things. But we can see there that actually our left back's gone really, really high, and he's really up against Ryan Leonard, at the kind of bottom left of the picture. Joe Bryan's picking up Mark Sykes on the right wing. We've got Tanner pretty high there, and he's kind of occupying Watmore. But what we've then done is we've split our two centre midfielders. So we split Williams off to the right-hand side and Jason Knight off to the left-hand side. And that's left Honeyman and Bradshaw in the kind of grey area with a bit of decision to make in terms of who do they go to. And I think they got caught between two stools here, and we got Max Bird as our number 10, who's then picked up the ball in a bit of a pocket, albeit it's not a dangerous pocket because it's in between your forwards and your midfield. What you don't want is that then kind of happening between your midfield and your centre backs. And then what we've done to kind of make that work is Scott Twine, as our left winger, has come in field and dragged SA infield, and that's what creates that room out on the left hand side.
I was just about to say that, Dave, looking at that picture there. So just looking at the movement again of Saville, who's right next to the referee, I'm almost thinking in that defensive shape, it's probably him who's out of position and it's causing the rest of the side to not be able to be in that full press. Because if he's on the 10 there, no doubt, I think Bradshaw is the one that's next to your number 10. He would almost then be able to press your other centre-back who's not got the ball. So you can see there the arm there that the Bristol City players are pointing out towards the right back. If Saville's on that press there in terms of your 10, Bradshaw then doesn't need to be there, and we'll probably be in a much better shape. But it's probably more credit down to your number 10. He's found that pocket there, and that's what's beating our press.
Yeah, I think this is what I'd call
structure,
cause and effect, Ben. And
absolutely.
I can only imagine, and this is me going from memory, the reason why Saville has not gone tight into Bird there is because this is probably midway through the first half from memory. And he's trying to protect Cooper against Sinclair Armstrong because he went a bit high early in the game. Brian probably was also a bit higher as well. And Sinclair Armstrong ran Cooper into that channel twice and caused him problems. So I suspect Cooper said, just come and protect me for a bit. And actually, probably 25 minutes into that game, that protection probably stifled us a bit as an attacking side, and you came into the game quite a lot. There's some really, once again, if anyone's interested, there's a really good website called SofaScore, and there's a little chart in there which kind of details which team's kind of in control from an attacking point of view by every minute of the game. And around about the 25th minute was when Millwall started to change the game. So it didn't actually happen at half-time. It happened before half-time, but you got your goals after half-time. But yeah, so just a couple of interesting examples here about how maybe something that happened in the earlier game maybe affected what happened to George Saville on that particular screenshot there.
And then for this one, mate?
Yeah, no, once again, this was just where we managed to move the ball quickly. So rather than go, although it's Pring receiving the ball high up at left back, we missed out Knight in the centre midfield as part of that split. So we bypassed kind of Honeyman as part of that. And we've gone straight from Dickey to Pring rather than use Knight. So rather than do two passes, we've done it in one pass. And as you can see, he's kind of running towards Pring thinking, oh God, I've left him in a bit too much room here. But SA's kind of caught in no man's land. And you can see our left winger, Scott Twine. In fact, actually, it's Anis Mehmeti actually in that game. Mehmeti's inverted. He's gone in field. And effectively, if Pring plays that pass first time, Mehmeti's away and in acres in that gap behind your right back. So just things to watch out for in future games. You know, decent structure, but it can be beaten. You know, where there's a strength in something, there's always a weakness somewhere else. And that kind of moving the ball fast by an opposition team might lead you to have problems.
And I think actually, if I was to, maybe it's for another show, I don't have the data for this one, but I think we will struggle against teams that move the ball quickly. I think when we're able to stamp our game, to press in the right areas and to have our structure, because we're still very well structured off the ball, I think we'll be fine. But when we're caught out and teams move the ball really quickly, which at times I felt you did, you played some really nice stuff in that opening 20 minutes. And then, of course, we were bullied by Sinclair Armstrong for that first 20 minutes. He completely destroyed us. But I think that's where we'll struggle. And maybe what we can do is that team style comparison that we put up earlier in terms of the styles of play, the kind of fast teams, I would imagine, just my 2 cents, we will struggle more against than teams that are sort of slow and intricate, which actually could probably be backed up by the fact that when we have more possession, we don't normally perform very well.
Yeah, I think that was the point I was making on that other picture where we had kind of Millwall as fast and direct. That was the difference that Ipswich were last season. They were so I've got the screen. Ipswich were kind of top right. They not only played fast, but they also kind of kept the ball well. And the number of times they beat teams pressed by playing into, say, someone like Chaplin dropping into space. And he either swiveled and spun a ball out to Leif Davis. So it kind of went from right-hand side through Chaplin out to Leif Davis in a really high position in 2 passes. It happened every single game, countless times, and teams couldn't get a handle on it. Or Chaplin would drop in, get the ball, and he'd pop it off to Morsey, and Morsey would ping a first-time ball. They opened up teams like that countlessly last season, and it was like, stop pressing them high. Stop pressing them high. Just let them bring the ball to the halfway line and then retreat and then see what they can do. So, yeah, ways around this thing. I think what we're saying today is that there's not one way of playing this beautiful game, is there?
No. And you brought back memories, Dave, of playing against Ipswich, who completely battered us twice last season. They beat a lot of teams comprehensively, but they destroyed us. I think what we now want to probably do is just to kind of bring it all to a conclusion in terms of what we're saying. So just going to share our sort of key takeouts, and we probably discovered more organically through this show, but we'll just sort of share these. So I think I'll read these out and then I'll sort of come to you fellas for some of your sort of key takeouts. So XG for and against have had a significant improvement season on season, which very basic point, but ultimately if you're creating good chances and more of those good chances at one end and you're conceding less of them the other end, you should have an upturn in results, right? So that's one key thing. The second thing is the pressing element we've discussed, right? So the fact that we are 3rd in the league for high turnovers. And I think a lot of that is down to the way that we're now playing with Honeyman being a number 10, an unorthodox number 10, but certainly a number 10. The Tanganga impact, we haven't necessarily touched on this, but Ben, do you just want to talk about the stat that we've got there in terms of how the XG we're giving away has reduced since Tanganga's come in?
I think that's exactly it, isn't it, mate? I think, again, we're talking about eye test versus sort of data, and whilst it might sound obvious to some people, we've conceded 3 and then 4 in 2 games and then 2 clean sheets since Tanganga's come back. That could be outweighed by, obviously, well, it was 0-0 against Hull, but we might have conceded a high amount of XG. But ultimately, we've just seen a huge reduction since he's come back into the side. And again, we spoke a lot about the Bristol City game where we said if Tanganga was playing, we wouldn't have conceded, things like that. So again, we just wanted to back it up by saying not only have we seen it sort of with our eyes in terms of Tanganga coming back into the team, and we performed better defensively, but we've actually seen that again statistically that we're giving up less XG with him in the side.
And I think it's 27% reduction, if I recall. So it's significant for sure. The efficiency in attack, we've seen quite clearly that we are the most direct, quick team in the league, and I take that as a positive personally. I think for sure. Then shots in open play. So there's a 27% increase. I've got my stats mixed up there. This is the 27%. The XG reduction, I think, is 50% actually.
Yeah.
So greater than what I originally quoted. But 27% shots in open play, which is actually refreshing because we've been often touted as set piece specialist, and score a lot of goals from set pieces. So the fact we're having more shots in open play, obviously more goals in open play, I think is a good thing. However, having said that, one thing that we haven't touched on, which is certainly part of our armory, is our long throws into the box. So if we get a throw anywhere in the opposition's half of their half, if you like, it basically
in the box.
It becomes a corner. Let's be real. It does, because Ryan Leonard is able to just. It's not quite Rory Delap, but it's a pretty long throw that gets us in there, and it's 20. The next highest team in the league is 12, and obviously average is only 5 per team, so we way out index there. And then when we're talking about turnovers, we've been turned over in our own third, the joint lowest amount in the league, or as I've misspelt, amount in the league. To me, that's a positive and a not so much, because what that tells me is that we basically, our centre-backs aren't particularly comfortable on the ball and they try to get rid of it at any point. But I'm okay with that, because that's the way we play, and I think that's fine. I'm not bothered by that. I don't think that Jake Cooper, maybe Javit Tanganga could, but Jake Cooper and Sean Hutchinson are certainly not ball-playing defenders. They are old-school, old-fashioned defenders that I think excel when we have a structure in place. So there we go. Gents, how do we conclude this? Let's Ben, I'll come to you first, mate. What are your kind of overall conclusions from the data sets that Dave has very kindly shared with us today? Yeah,
I mean, again, we've touched on it a couple of times. It's, have we seen a progression in our play style? Have we ultimately, is data backing up what we think we've seen right now? We've said that 3 or 4 times already throughout the show, but ultimately, we are playing a shorter brand of football because we're playing more passes. Our progressive passing into midfield and midfield into the front line is better. And ultimately, we're creating a decent amount with that XG being highest or second in the league, depending on where you get your data from. So, look, whilst we haven't got the points on the board that maybe we would like to have had or ultimately should have, the data doesn't lie. So it will improve, and I think if over the next 3 games, where I think the level of teams that we're going to play is going to be better than the first 4, if we're still trending or at the top of those data sets, I think that's a really good indication of how hopefully we might see the rest of the season going.
Now on the head, Ben. Dave?
Yeah, not a lot more to add to that, really, Ben. I think, from the pure data point of view, I think a lot of people, bemoan things like XG and things like that. But I think hopefully what this kind of show's done today is to show that actually, if you take more than one thing, and as you said, Chris, at the start of this show, you put up lots and lots of data and try and work out which bits are important and which bits interplay with other bits. And we've talked about, we've not just talked about XG, we've talked about, pressing and things like that, which are not things that typically the stuff that you see out there, on your Twitter on a Sunday morning after a game and things like that. You can start to build a picture that represents how your team plays. The biggest problem is, I think someone coined, can you use data to crack the code? And I don't think you can. I think, if you say, well, we need to get 25 box entries instead of 15, for example, well, it's kind of baseless. You have to think about how do you create those? And those box entries come from, the way you play football. And some of that's not easy to define in data. So I don't think it's one of those things where you really want to get into, oh, well, we need to get that number up to that. I think it's about reflecting on the numbers, a large set of numbers, and try and say, well, okay, I think that's the reason behind why we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that's what we've done today. So I think that's been good.
Ben?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I just wanted to say, just to follow on from what Dave said there, look, it isn't just about looking at XG and just isolating that. I think Dave sort of summarised it quite nicely towards the end there. It's about pulling multiple data sets together and saying, are we doing the right things? Because again, our pressing data, as we've spoken about, is really high, but we're conceding a lot of shots and chances from it. Well, that would tell me that we don't want to be pressing because we can't press, or we're not very good at it, or other teams are better at breaking our press. So all we try to do today is bring a lot of data and try and simplify it. I know we've put a lot of analogies and a lot of letters together for people. But yeah, we're trying to kind of simplify it by looking at multiple data sets, but looking at the most important areas.
And I'm going to struggle to add anything more to you both. I think the one thing I can probably say that's slightly different is my personal view is, given what we've just analysed, it's about as good as you could hope for a Millwall team. And what I mean by that is, given the ability to recruit and our finances, but then also, and the types of players that we can attract, but then also playing a system and a style that is core to Millwall's DNA over 4 games. And again, the sustainability question is one that we'll address in future weeks. But if we keep that up, that's about as good as I think you can hope for a Millwall team. And that will see us, I believe, comfortably, certainly safe, and hopefully more in the top echelons of the Championship. So for me, sort of my final take is, and this may not be popular with certain Millwall fans, but I think Neil Harris deserves a lot of credit, because when he came back last season, he had 13 cup finals. He played a style that was boring, pragmatic, not pleasing on the eye, but it was effective. And it was 1-0 wins and all that kind of stuff. This season, he has evolved it. A lot of the players are still similar. And that, to me, that just shows that he has developed his tactical nous, and he deserves a lot of credit. So long may that continue. I'm going to come to both of you just for sort of final thoughts. Before I do that, though, I just want to say a huge thank you, Dave. Seriously, I am an absolute data geek, so this is one I'll probably listen back multiple times. But I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed not just the data that you bring, but the way in which you approach it. And you're just a top bloke all round. And even though you are a farmer, mate, you're always welcome back. I had to get that one in. But thank you so much, Dave. We appreciate it very much. And Dave, where can people find you as well, if you don't mind sharing?
Twitter, at Fevs Football. You'll see lots of stuff, predominantly City related, but across the EFL and stuff, football related. Not all data by any stretch. Lots of my stuff probably is like those little blobby pictures that I showed up earlier on. So, it's just trying to give my thoughts as to why I think the match played out the way it did, the previous day and things like that. And if I've got some data to kind of help back that up as well, then I'll do it. But yeah, at Fevs Football.
Awesome. Super stuff. Gents, final thoughts. Ben.
First of all, if the club are looking for a new data analyst team, we are available. So that's the first plug. But I was just going to say, yeah, again, Dave, thank you very much for providing all that data. As Chris has already said, we are huge data geeks and do like to talk through it. To see it like that, absolutely amazing. And look, this show might not be for everyone. We're really into the data, but we do welcome any feedback, any comments, anything you'd like to see as well in future shows in terms of data. What can we analyse? What would you like to see? So just a shout out to anyone that has been listening. But again, yeah, Dave, thank you very much. And if the club are listening, we are available as a collective. We will be taking Dave away from Bristol City.
I have to negotiate my day rate.
Awesome stuff, gents. Just before we close out, obviously, just to mention that everything we're doing this season is all going to Cancer Research UK. So if you have enjoyed this, please do like, share, subscribe, comment. Even if you just comment, hi, thanks. It all helps the YouTube algorithm. So please do. We are doing everything we can to try and get a nice juicy number come the end of the season. Gents, that's a wrap. We didn't know how long it was going to go. We've done an hour. I think we probably could have done 2, but we'll leave it there. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed that. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.